Hello and welcome to the Reason Roundtable. This is the podcast of free minds, free markets, and free takes. I'm your host, Peter Suderman, and today I am joined by my illustrious colleagues, Katherine Mangu-Ward, Matt Welch, and special guest, Matthew Petti. Everybody say hello.
Howdy.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, great following of the instructions there. So this is normally where I say happy Monday, but our topics today aren't so happy. Over the weekend, we saw a major new war break out in the Middle East as Israel struck Iran, and Iran fired back in what many now expect to be a protracted conflict. On the home front, we saw political violence in Minnesota. 2 Democratic state lawmakers were shot. 1 was killed in what has been described as an assassination. Last night, after a massive manhunt, authorities in Minnesota caught a 57-year-old man that they say murdered Melissa Hortman, the top Democrat in the House, as well as her husband. The man also is alleged to have shot State Senator John Hoffman, a fellow Democrat, and his spouse over the weekend. Still a lot we don't know, still a lot of details, but it is tragic and horrific. Matt Welch, you have been warning of the increasing likelihood of political violence in America. I don't think this was exactly what you were predicting, but talk us through your sense that something awful was coming and sort of how you're feeling this Monday morning.
I mean, I was predicting death, so that happened. And not just on the political assassination in Minnesota, but also on the streets of Salt Lake City, where there was a guy who showed up with, I think, an AR-15 rifle and started moving on the crowd. And then somebody else who had a gun, because it was Utah, shot him and then also shot an innocent bystander who died. So the weekend's news was terrible, bad, good. And then also bad. The terrible we've already talked about. The bad includes rioting and vandalism and violence in Portland, Oregon, Culpeper, Virginia. A guy drove a car through a crowd. And Los Angeles, a couple of other places. The good, with the head tilt, is that there were a large number of No Kings protests, including one that I went to, we'll talk about later probably, that were almost surprisingly kind of peaceful and chill and even semi-focused of all things. And then the bad, again, is that so many politicians, including and even especially the president of the United States, acted and reacted to all of the various tumult this weekend with ways that did not de-escalate the political violence, the climate for political violence and conflict in this country remotely. Trump, in particular, on Sunday went and said he's going to sick ICE in big Democratic cities on purpose going forward, which is absolutely no way to try to de-escalate what he's been doing.
Katherine, since Matt mentioned the climate of violence, I just want to read you the top headline from the New York Times when I woke up on Sunday. Like school shootings, political violence is becoming almost routine. And then the subhead is threats and violent acts have become part of the political landscape in the U.S. Still shocking, but somehow not so surprising. This obviously comes on the heels of the unrest in Los Angeles. And there's this sense of a kind of spiraling chaos in America right now. David French, also of the New York Times, columnist there, recently wrote a column arguing that America is no longer a stable country. How are you feeling about all this? Do you agree with the New York Times headlines?
Usual strong answer there is no. And I guess my real answer is no a little, in the sense that obviously none of what we just started this podcast with is good news. I think the comparison to kind of mass shootings or school shootings is really apt because we at Reason have spent many, many years working really hard to contextualize those. And, you know, I think that in the context of school shootings, there's often a kind of follow-up call for gun control or other state action. I think it's been a little blurrier with this so-called political violence. But I also think that it's important to keep in mind kind of what the percentages are of these occurrences, both in terms of just murders or killings in the United States generally, and also, you know, their frequency in world history. It's bad. I don't want to be the guy that says like, it's totally fine that people are just out here shooting, lawmakers or whatever. It's clearly not good. It's totally fine that people are just driving cars through crowds. It's clearly not good. But also, I guess I feel like the world is spiraling out of control might be too strong of a statement. Or certainly the country is spiraling out of control with respect to political violence is too strong of a statement. I think we will talk about what's going on in Israel and Iran later. That has a stronger case for the world is spiraling out of control than these incidents.
Matthew Petti, I think my question is the world spiraling out of control here?
Sorry.
I know you're focused, at least in your reporting, on foreign policy, on the situation in the Middle East. Strikes between Israel and Iran have intensified over the weekend. What's your current sense of doom, worry, concern, and how are you feeling about all this?
I do want to say, I think the part of the problem is just like, it's not that hard to kill people. That's a terrible quote out of context. But I think there's a lot of people who have sort of intelligent enough to figure out how to kill someone, but not intelligent enough to think through like what happens afterwards and what you accomplish by that. And I think that is a problem that a lot of people have settled on, this sort of midwit. But again, it's such a small percentage of the population that sort of gets into that Goldilocks zone of like, enough executive function to pick up a gun and go somewhere, not enough executive function to think, oh, this is going to go really badly for me and everything I support.
These are almost by definition disturbed people in pretty much every case, even when there is a clear enough or sort of semi-clear political motive, as it appears to maybe be the case in the Minnesota shooting, where the guy had a manifesto, reportedly. We don't know what's in it, and a list of targets. I mean, this is just, most people who are even have like quite serious political grievances obviously do not do this. But we'll talk more about all of this, about the violence, the protests, and the unfolding situation in the Middle East in a little bit. Plus, a listener question about the Los Angeles immigration protests and how we feel about them, report from the No Kings rally, so much more. Before we take a break, though, Reason now has a debate series, and I want to tell you about it. It is called Reason Versus, and it pits Reason versus other publications on big issues that divide us. Next week, we're going to be taking on City Journal, which is a publication of the Manhattan Institute and another think tank. And we are going to be debating the proposition, legalize all drugs. Just 3 words, but a big, big idea. Reason's Billy Binion and Jacob Sullum will be for it. City Journal's Charles Lehman and Rafael Mangual will be opposed. I will be moderating, and you, the audience, if you buy a ticket, you will get to vote to decide who wins. This debate will be on the evening of Tuesday, June 24th at the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C. That's Tuesday, June 24th in Washington, D.C. You can buy tickets now at reason.com/events. That's reason.com/events. We'll be right back. What if one day you could change how you think, how you lead, and how you shape your future? Join Reliance College for Reliance Day, Saturday, June 28th in Los Angeles. This one-day high-impact experience is designed for students, professionals, and lifelong learners ready to level up their thinking in an AI-driven world. At Reliance Day, you'll dive into collaborative, Socratic discussions and sharpen the critical thinking and leadership skills that drive success in college, business, and life. It's a full day of intellectual challenge and creative exploration, rooted in the great books and Montessori-inspired methods that have transformed over 400 lives. Go to reliancecollege.org/Reliance Days to register today. That's reliancecollege.org/Reliance Days. Can't wait to see you Saturday, June 28th. So last week, Israel launched a surprise attack against Iran, targeting the country's nuclear facilities and top military leadership. Iran has so far retaliated with multiple barrages of ballistic missiles, though perhaps a less intense barrage, given that Israel appears to have taken out a lot of the ballistic missile capabilities in their first strike. Israel's position is that this was a preemptive, defensive strike to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, which the country views as an existential threat, and which at least some folks in the Israeli government have said, well, Iran is getting a lot closer to having a nuclear weapon. Iran has always maintained that its nuclear program is for civilian use only, though it has enriched uranium far beyond what is necessary for civilian purposes. All indications are that this is not a brief exchange of unpleasantries, not just a couple of days of rocket fire, but the start of what could be an extended war between the two countries. How long this lasts, how much it expands and escalates, anyone's guess right now. I just don't think we know. Matthew, give us the lay of the land. Just what's the state of play to the extent we understand it? And in particular, what role is America playing here? What do we know about what America has done and is doing in this conflict?
Sure. So as you said, it was, I think you described the opening round of this pretty well. I think an important detail here is that Iran was in negotiations with the U.S. To basically regulate its nuclear program. And they had a round of negotiations scheduled for Sunday, which obviously did not happen, partly because one of the Israeli strikes hit the top negotiator on the Iranian side, which I think is a pretty clear sign of how interested the U.S. and Israel are in this. Trump kind of came out and said, I mean, there's sort of a confused reporting on how much. It's very obvious the U.S. gave Israel a green light to do this. How premeditated this was. Like, were the negotiations on Sunday a ruse to get the Iranians to let their guard down, or was this sort of a last-minute decision that Trump said okay to, seeing like whatever, roll the dice? Yeah, and I think that's sort of the broader context in which this happened. I think the Israeli government says it was preemptive. They've used the word preemptive, but what they're trying to preempt, they've given a sort of different and vague answers. I think it's more of an attack of opportunity where Iran is a opponent that has vexed them for a very long time, is now on the back foot. And so they think, let's just kind of go in while we can, do what we can while we can against them. I think for Trump, this was a way to build leverage, and a very badly miscalculated way to build leverage, because as you said, this is not going to be a one-off weekend and then everyone comes back to the, well, anything is possible, but it looks very unlikely now that this is going to be an unpleasant weekend and Iran comes back to the negotiating table battered. I think this is going to become a big and protracted war. And there's an open question of what happens with the nuclear file.
So one thing that you say that like this was an attack of opportunity on Iran. Iran is weakened. All right. This is I think just sort of a big part of the kind of the context for this attack. Officials in the United States, in Israel, have been talking about bombing Iran for decades. I mean, for at least 15, maybe 20 years right now, and just to get rid of the nuclear program. But what has happened here is that Hezbollah has been defanged, right? Hamas is no longer the force that it was after, the war with Israel, right? And Iran even has been weakened somewhat in a series of attacks, assassinations, that sort of thing recently. So there's a long history here. And Katherine, I would just sort of want you to kind of contextualize this for a libertarian audience and for a libertarian worldview, right? Like, we've had a shadow war going on between Iran and Israel for years now, right? Like all of these kind of small attacks, these unofficial attacks, sometimes unacknowledged, right? Attacks through proxies, assassinations, that sort of thing. But this is a major escalation into something like a full-blown war. So you're the editor of a libertarian magazine, and libertarians tend to oppose new wars. How do you process this? Like, what's your big picture take?
I wish that I had a better answer to that. And I think that the real answer is that there isn't a clean one because this conflict is so deeply embedded in the region, because there is no clear aggressor in any given moment, because each side has been aggressing for all of my life, at least, and much longer against each other. You don't get that tidy answer of, well, who's acting in self-defense? Like, who is? They both are. Neither of them are. I don't know. One thing I will say is maybe I am an unsophisticated thinker. Surely I am on these matters. But like, the talks never work, right? Like, we're always in talks with Iran we're going to fix the nuclear thing. We're talking. We got an agreement. No, we don't have an agreement. Oh, we do have an agreement, but they're violating the agreement. Oh, the agreement is different now, but they're also still violating it. Like, am I an idiot, or does that just kind of not ever work?
Well, there was a nuclear agreement.
No, I want
with Iran.
I want Matthew Petti to tell me if I'm an idiot. I am open to Matthew Petti telling me I'm an idiot.
No, I don't think you're an idiot. I think just the nuclear issue. I think actually the political class in the U.S. intentionally confuses a lot of what's going on here. There were talks that were successful in 2015, and Iran had basically traded away its nuclear capabilities. And without really a pretense of Iran breaking, I mean, more or less the Obama administration's vision was, well, actually, let's go back to 2002 in the Bush administration.
Sure.
Iran offered this document called the Grand Bargain Telegram, where they told the Bush administration basically, if you guys commit to non-interference, like basically recognize us as a sovereign country and deal with us without trying to do regime change, then we will trade away the things that alarm you, like these sort of non-state militia, proxy interventions, the missiles, the long-range missiles that freak the US out, and the nuclear program. And the 2015 agreement was the sort of, from the Obama administration's perspective, was supposed to be the first step of the grand bargain, where Iran basically accepts permanent restrictions on its ability to enrich uranium, and inspectors in all of its facilities and cameras in all its facilities, et cetera, in exchange for basically being allowed to have normal trade relations with the US and Europe. And the Trump administration, and I think this goes beyond Trump himself, this was a very bipartisan feeling that actually this first step is, like, we shouldn't be doing the stepwise thing. This is not enough. And we should use the tools available to us to pressure Iran to accept a deal on all of the issues at once. And then Mike Pompeo basically put out a statement that was basically asking for capitulation, and tore up the deal, basically escalated on all fronts of pressure against Iran. And then the Biden administration, that's when it started to become inconclusive. But part of it was because Iran was saying, well, we want the 2015 deal, like a clean return to that, and then we'll talk about the other issues. But the Biden administration, faced with a lot of internal pressure, but also because I think they genuinely thought they could pull this off, really wanted to, like, sort of push Iran to accept a deal on better terms for the US, worse for Iran. And then that sort of fell apart with the protest movement in Iran, because it just politically looked bad to be talking to a repressive government while it's, like, doing repression. And then it fell apart again because of October 7th. And I think Trump restarted those talks. And again, like, I think there was a clear chance of progress, but he decided to just roll the dice on allowing an Israeli attack. But I do think there is a deal on the table, and the problem really is the political will on the American side to actually accept a compromise and accept that, we're not going to get everything we want in the first round, and maybe we won't get everything we want ever, but there are, it has to be a stepwise process. I think now, though, it's just very bleak, the chances of an off-ramp. Iran did, the Wall Street Journal just reported before we logged on that Iran basically said, we're treating the US and Israel as two separate factors here, and we're still willing to talk to the US if it does not join the Israeli war. And we could talk about, the prospects of US intervention and how much the US is sort of involved by default. But yeah, I do think there are diplomatic off-ramps. It's just like the political conditions in Washington have not allowed the US to take them, because there's a sort of just one more war temptation, right? Just push a little bit more and get a little bit more if they're weak and they want to talk. And of course, that sort of just puts us on a road to what we're seeing now.
I want to bring Matt Welch in on the prospect of escalation here, because one of the big worries about Israel striking Iran is that it would break out into a much larger, much more protracted, more chaotic and uncontrollable conflict. Some people are even saying, something like World War III, whether or not you believe that. But then there's this other position that we are hearing from the pro-Israeli side, and from some people in the United States government, that, well, we don't have to worry about that because Iran's top military leadership is all dead. The proxies are all weakened, like we talked about. Hezbollah is no longer there, right? So there's no one to organize a major counteroffensive. This can't possibly break out, right? It seems to me like this is at least partially wishful thinking, too early to know. But do you buy the argument that the risk of expansion is actually quite low? How do you sort of see that discussion?
It's already escalated is the thing. I mean, Israel had the element of surprise, aided and abetted totally by the Trump administration. They were part of the ruse to allow Iranian leadership to think, okay, it's not going to happen. Netanyahu's going to have a trip over there. We got our negotiations coming up, blah, blah, blah. Trump administration was part of that. They knew what was going on beforehand. They have to be intimately involved with some of the technical aspects of what Israel is doing with its military, to be clear. So you have your first 2 or 3 days as a technologically much superior country, military, although small, and you do a surprise attack, and that surprise attack includes degrading to a huge degree the ability to send ballistic missiles which, let's not forget, Iran sent ballistic missiles into Israel last year, twice, right? I think a total of more than 300 ballistic missiles into Israel. That's kind of a big deal. But with all of that, of course, it's an escalation. We've already seen on both sides attacks of oil refinery production. The Israeli defense minister in the last 24 hours basically said to Iranian civilians in Tehran, well, you better leave because we're going to kill you, which is not great. That's not a great thing. And one thing that for those who are worried about escalation, even those who are very solidly in the pro-Israel camp, should be worried about is that you're hearing from the top levels of the Israeli government on down some variations of, yes, we started this, and we started this for a variety of reasons, but the U.S. has to end it. Part of the reason why they say that is because the ultimate target of the nuclear regime is in a place that Israeli weaponry cannot get to. You need a U.S. bunker buster bomb to get into the Fordo, or however you pronounce that, installation. But also, it's, the U.S. is the big brother. The U.S. is the good cop in comparison to the bad cop of Israel here. So all of that suggests the possibility for escalation. And I think one thing that we have seen as Israel has degraded Iran's ability to wage proxy wars, murderous proxy wars on its borders, sending rockets and terrorists into its country, which kind of is not great to experience. So they have degraded all of that. But Israel has not shown, to my knowledge or understanding, a lot of thought process about end game of any of it. What is the end game in Gaza besides rubble? And we still don't have the hostages back, and who knows how that's going to be governed once it ever stops, if it ever stops. Even in Beirut, which is a lot better situated for Israel's point of view than it used to be, it's not kind of clear what the political future is over there. And right now, if you were escalating against the regime, there's a lot of people rubbing their hands at the possibilities of regime change. Israelis tend to bristle when Americans who are skeptical about intervention point out that America made a lot of dumb mistakes after the existential experience of 9/11. They have reasons to bristle at that analogy because in some ways what they experienced was worse, more immediate, and with more immediately relevant history. However, one of those lessons of 9/11 is that you tend to stovepipe intelligence in order to fit your sort of desired outcomes. And if you haven't thought about plan, or you haven't thought about the fourth and fifth step in the process, you are setting yourself up for potential, not just failure, but catastrophic failure down the road. And right now, I just don't see what the outcome of a escalating war between these two countries can be, even as Iran is shooting its wad, literally, with whatever missiles that they, it's a wad of missiles, Katherine,
Thank you, Matt.
out there. So maybe they will shoot themselves out. But war is a horrible thing, and escalating war creates conditions that we cannot control or predict.
I do think the Israeli doctrine, or the answer, is sort of mowing the lawn, where it's sort of like they have an idea of like, the U.S. likes solutions to things. The Israeli security thinking is sort of, well, we can just kind of keep conflicts in a low boil, and then rather than sort of decisively having an end game. And the problem for that is, first of all, that's kind of what led to October 7th. But second of all, it does, like you said, rely on the U.S. being a big brother because, right, it's as you said, I mean, from like day 2 or 3 of this, they started saying the U.S. needs to come in. On the Fordo nuclear facility, I know this is not a funny topic, war is not a funny topic, but there's a little bit of a Looney Tunes thing going on where they've sort of been testing out their ability to hit underground stuff in a different nuclear facility in Natanz with like repeated bomb strikes. And so satellite images show that the Iranians have just taken like construction, like backhoes, and just put dirt over the holes. And it's this weird attrition race of like who can dig a bigger hole with bombs versus who can
fill the hole back in.
Yeah.
That's extremely Wile E. Coyote. You're not wrong.
But that kind of shows the nature of this thing where it is a sort of attrition conflict of, with the missiles, it's like Israel runs out of interceptors first, or Iran runs out of missiles. What's cheaper to produce? They've been testing each other's air defenses with all sorts of it's not like the Hezbollah war in Lebanon, where I think Israel got like pretty clean escalation, and I've underestimated them from the beginning, got pretty clean escalation dominance. I think this is a much bigger sort of opponent that's less technologically advanced, but also has like the resources of a state to sort of push things back and forth. So I think the Israeli bet now has been sort of because if the US comes in, I mean, that's a huge strategic depth. But yeah, we can talk about what the US is already doing and what they might do in the future.
Catherine, I actually want to ask you
quickly, just to point out that the Israeli airspace dominance over Iran is just a huge deal. That is, I don't think a lot of people predicted that would happen, and I think that affects things going forward. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of strategic tactical ability, right? Like it's both good for it. It allows them to attack freely, but also allows them surveillance, and so they can see what's going on in a way that is just totally free, or nearly totally free. So, Katherine, I want to go to you and just ask about the sort of American politics of this. The Trump coalition has been notably less hawkish than sort of the GOP of yore, right? You worked at the Weekly Standard, the neoconservative publication, like during the Bush presidency, right? You were there when George W. Bush was president. Yeah. So you remember the old Republican Party that was just much more hawkish, at least in leadership and probably all around, right? And the Trump coalition is maybe not totally coherent, but at least less universally, less fully hawkish than the George W. Bush coalition was. And this seems like it's going to create some divides in that coalition, like it's going to end up being a kind of a wedge issue for the MAGA right. How do you see this playing out in the United States, especially as this conflict ends up, it's going to go on, and it's going to be like, how does this end? And one answer that people are going to suggest is it's going to end when America decides to end it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually do find Trump's response just in the last couple of days oddly relatable. Like he basically has said like, well, I guess it would be good to do a deal, but maybe they just have to fight it out. And it's like, first of all, what? Like, you're the president of the United States. Like, you should not be thinking in real time as you're tweeting or truth socialing about this conflict. But also, that's not wrong analysis, and it reflects what you say, which is that Trump is not ideological on this question in the way that previous presidents have been, and especially Republicans. He's sort of a pragmatist in a moment when there is no clear pragmatic way forward.
Well, I think Trump has sort of two things that he kind of likes generally on this, which is he prefers peace. Right. I mean, I do think that, like, all else being equal, he would prefer that at least the United States. Peace. And then he also likes to be seen as strong. And these are two warring, conflicting impulses in many cases.
Right. So Matthew is right. Like, it's, there's the peace through strength approach, and there's the peace through peace approach. And Trump is sort of, I guess he's a peace through strength guy. But yes, I was at the Weekly Standard when we were busy starting the Iraq War, and the tone was so different. To the extent that I was sort of inside the conversation and part of that conversation when it was happening, the feeling of kind of righteousness, the feeling of like, this is the only way forward, the kind of clarity that neocons had in that moment, and the presence, the sort of power that neocons had in the Republican coalition is so different than the current moment where everyone's just kind of looking at Trump, right? As it's just the party is just Trump, and everyone is just looking at Trump to see what they're supposed to think about this. And he's not clear, so they're not clear.
Okay, Matt Welch, give us some clarity here. What lessons, if any, have we learned from this whole ordeal?
Oh God, yeah. Make this brief, Matt.
Just wrap it up for us.
Give us the Axios bullet points.
No,
smart.
No
brevity.
Axios. No semaphore, no kinks. Okay, that's how we're going to do it.
We'll get to that in a minute.
We don't know. One lesson is that Israel no longer feels like it can tolerate the status quo of October 6th from their point of view, meaning the day before October 7th, they were ringed by hostile actors and etc. I think that the untenable things on October 6th also included the expansion of settlements in the West Bank and the treatment of people there, the U.S. over-reliance on putting its thumb into every single pie. I think I kept that metaphor clean, Catherine. In the region, there's a bunch of other stuff that Israel is less concerned with, but it's clear, especially by how much the anti-Netanyahu factions in Israel are supporting this, that this has the support as of right now of the Israeli public, because Israel is a different country after October 7th.
Matthew Petti, what is the off-ramp? What's the end game here? You have 30 seconds.
Oh, God, 30 seconds. Well, I guess that just depends on whether the U.S. gets involved or not. I mean, the U.S. is involved by default because we have troops on the ground since October 2024 manning the missile interceptors. We are sharing intelligence and the technical side, as you said. But the Israelis have also been yelling for the U.S. to get involved directly. It's possible that the U.S. just goes in with overwhelming force and then inflicts like a military defeat on Iran, in which case we end up with an Iraq 1991 situation where we've got this sort of slow burn, mowing the lawn war where the U.S. is trying to hold down this big country and sort of no real conclusive end. It's possible that this sort of diplomatic overtures work, and then Trump suddenly changes his mind, says, stop the war, we're going to come to another deal. Although I don't see that happening until there's at least some exhaustion, particularly on the Israeli side, because they have no incentive to stop while they have the upper hand. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's also possible that the U.S. gets into a big war with Iran, and then Iran starts hitting U.S. bases in like the oil-producing Arab states, and then we have like, $20 a gallon gas or something crazy. I mean, unfortunately, there's a huge range of ways this can go very badly, and I think a very narrow one would go well, which would have to involve the U.S. saying, no, we are not going to like back this to the bitter end. This is, we're taking a step back, and we'll talk to Iran about the nuclear issue when they're ready to talk about it.
All right.
Can I just briefly say that the two Matts seem to have handed off the bad metaphor situation, and Matthew Petti is now mowing a lawn that is slow burning and also boiling, I think, earlier, or maybe simmering. So I hate it, and I blame you both. Sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
No real conclusive end, exhaustion, maybe a big war, and bad metaphors. That is not a great way to end this segment, but unfortunately, that's where we're at. Let's go to a sponsor. If you're tired of cable news debates and Twitter shouting matches, and you're looking for serious, good faith conversations between people who actually care about liberty, then it's time to check out the Future of Freedom podcast. Each episode dives deep into a single topic: tariffs, campus speech, Doge, brings together two guests who disagree about the best path forward. But here's the twist. This isn't a debate show. No interrupting, no dunking. Each guest, whether libertarian or conservative, has to make their case, not just tear down the other side. It's compelling, civil, and genuinely challenging. You'll hear familiar reason voices like Nick Gillespie, Stephanie Slade, and Joe Lancaster, alongside other principled thinkers on the right and center-right, each bringing sharp ideas to the table. So if you believe the future of freedom depends on more than just winning arguments, and you're ready for something deeper than the usual echo chambers of Twitter and etc., check out the Future of Freedom podcast. Real disagreement, real ideas, real conversations. Subscribe to the Future of Freedom wherever you get your podcasts. That's Future of Freedom. All right, let's take a listener question. This week's comes from Mark, who writes, Dear Reason Roundtable, why are so many libertarians, including some at the Reason Roundtable, dismissive or even contemptuous of the anti-ICE protests in Los Angeles and elsewhere? Whether they know it or not, the protesters are invoking some basic libertarian values: freedom of travel, open borders, due process, a general suspicion about the use of government force. Yes, some violent and destructive jerks have shown up, but shouldn't libertarians be judging the protesters as individuals rather than collectively? Surely we should support thousands of peaceful protesters for a cause we believe in, even if there are a few dozen violent jerks mixed in, especially when they're standing against one of the most coercive and dehumanizing arms of the government. Catherine, what do you say?
I think this question is spot on. I will say here in D.C., in addition to the kind of broad no kings response around the country, we also had the military parade this weekend. in honor of Trump's birthday and also the birthday of the Army. And starting early in the day, we had people on all the overpasses on 66 on the highway leading into the city with signs. The first one I saw said, "Honk if you love due process." And I honked because I do. So I just think that this question writer is correct. It's important to keep in mind what the protesters are standing for and evaluate them individually. As I said last week, I wish a few idiots would stop throwing rocks, breaking windows, etc., because I think the anti-ICE protests are for a good cause, and broadly the No Kings protests as well.
Matt Welch, what do you think?
I am not dismissive of anybody except the jerk, rioter, vandal, violence people who I'm contemptuous of. But the nonviolent protests is fine. I don't go through life learning lessons from people at protests. I did go to one here in Brooklyn, downtown, and I was shocked by how nice it was, actually. It's like 700.
I'm going to ask you more about that in just a minute.
But broadly speaking, peaceful protests are fine. I saw some due process signs, and I was surprised by how disciplined these particular protests are. And anti-ICE protests make sense directionally, as I wrote last week. So I'm not dismissive of those things at all, and I think it's perfectly fine when people are aroused by aggressive actions from the federal government. Just don't burn crap and throw stuff at cops.
Matthew Petti, how do you respond?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking the wrong person. I'm not dismissive at all. I think one thing that's important to drive home is that protests are in the U.S. and I mean everywhere always tend to be these sort of like very complex, multifaceted things where if you want, you can go find some unhinged rhetoric or violent actions or whatever. If you want, you can find nice families with their strollers. I mean, we saw the same thing with the Palestine protests earlier. And often the most unhinged stuff is coming from like, honestly, it's like the same 10 people who go to every protest as a party for communist revolution, socialism, whatever, like alphabet soup Trotskyist group sends their people to every single protest. And I will say that, I mean, if libertarians don't like the left dominating these things, then you too can become one of those permanent protesters.
And you can do it peacefully, which is the right way to do it. And
an unhinged permanent protester, a normal one.
A hinged permanent protester.
I think this listener may be responding to something I said when I opened the discussion last week, which is I sort of said, I don't like any of it about what's going on. I didn't like the raids against workplaces. I didn't like the militarized response, and I didn't like the violent protests. And if I may have just sort of said that I don't like the protests with the violence. I said free speech is protected and violence is not. And what I should have been clearer about and should have been should have been more clear about is that that if you're gonna I absolutely support the protests so long as they are nonviolent and so long as they are not breaking out into fires and riots and the rest of it. Okay.
So I do think we're giving too short shrift to the fact that there are libertarians who basically think we should be doing more enforcement of laws against certain types of immigration, right? That's the other thing that's happening in this question. There are lots of libertarians. I don't think the ones on this podcast, but in the world for sure, who have come down on the side that a crackdown on illegal immigration is in line with their values about rule of law and private property. And I think that those people are worth taking seriously. I disagree. I think this should be our lowest law enforcement priority in almost every case. And I think that the way that ICE is conducting itself in recent weeks is pretty abysmal and worth protesting. But there are libertarians for sure who would say, listen, these guys are doing their jobs and they're important jobs and they shouldn't be attacked for it. I think that's a misunderstanding of the proper role of the federal government in this question. But those libertarians exist.
And one thing that has happened just in the past couple of days is that ICE has changed its tune. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, a reminder that we love to answer your short, succinct, pithy, and otherwise not very long questions. Please send your questions to podcasts@reason.com. That's podcasts@reason.com. While we're on the topic of protests and demonstrations, we saw this weekend the nationwide series of rallies against Trump dubbed No Kings. Matt Welch, you said you were there. You want to give us a more detailed report? Why'd you go? What'd you see? What'd you think?
I went because I had some time to kill and wanted to have a look at it and see what it was like so I can characterize it. And I was happy to smile at signs that said due process and I support immigrants because I like due process and I support immigrants. And also the No Kings framing, I saw a lot of people on the right kind of poo-pooing it preemptively and saying it's a stupid slogan or something. Couldn't disagree more, perhaps because I've been using the word monarchical so many times in this podcast in 2025. But I think one of the unifyingly awful things about the Trump presidency is the extent to which he is one man ruling his way through all kinds of policies, whether it's tariffs, whether it's immigration enforcement, whether it's, as I saw while we were having technical difficulties in this podcast, him saying like, oh, maybe we should put China in the G7. What? Okay. It's not the way we do things. Partly this is because of Congress and et cetera abdicating, but I don't like that. And I think No Kings is kind of a clever way to go at it. So what I saw was a bunch of people. I was probably on the younger side of that protest and about 750 people just wandering around or circling around Cadman Plaza. There were no speakers. It was not, to my shock, a big omnicausal protest where you saw a bunch of stuff about foreign policy or to free Mumia or whatever, communist gobbledygook that you always see at these things. You didn't, actually. There was a lot, basically no kings. There was only one hey, hey, ho, ho chant in the half hour I was there, which is almost a victory, I guess. Nobody snapped their fingers. No, it's just like a bunch of like boomers and late Gen Xers from Brooklyn protesting kings and this anti-Drumpf type of posters as well. But there's quite a bit of due process, and it was fine. It was perfectly lovely. There's about 6 bored cops. No one really cared, and then everyone went home. So that was nice. And I would like to just, if you don't mind, Peter, since it might segue into what you're going next, and if it doesn't, I apologize. But there's some word that Trump was backing off of some of the ICE enforcements. That he's like, oh, I've just found out that the hotel industry and our great farmers are a little bummed that we're raiding their workforce. So we're going to do something else. People love to jump at the straw, whatever straw that Trump is offering them on policy, because he's monarchical. And so they want the good thing to happen when he says something. What he truth socialed on Sunday is the policy of the United States, and it's a precursor of the conflicts, including on the streets, to come. I will read this little portion of it, if you don't mind, Peter, which is, ICE officers are herewith ordered by notice of this truth to do all in their power to achieve the very important goal of delivering the single largest mass deportation program in history. In order to achieve this, we must expand efforts to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, where millions upon millions of illegal aliens reside. These and other such cities are the core of the Democratic Power Center, where they use illegal aliens to expand their voter base, cheat in elections, and grow the welfare state, robbing good-paying jobs, etc. These radical left Democrats are sick of mind, hate our country, and actually want to destroy our inner cities. I have been, and that's the end of the quote, I have been judging every politician from the president on down, governors, mayors, California as well, by the metric of, are you making political violence in the streets more or less likely by your actions and by your words? This truth social answers, I think, that question definitively, and also sets us up for the conflicts that we're going to see going forward. And it makes me sick.
Yeah, that Truth Social actually went on a lot longer. There were parts of it you didn't read about how the Democrats with their it's not just that they support immigration, it's that they believe in open borders, transgender for everybody, and men playing in women's sports. They're destroying the cities, the whole thing. It's really something. And there's so many capitalized words, just so many capitalized words that don't need to be capitalized. Katherine, you are an anarchist who worked at the Weekly Standard. I think that's what we've established for you. That's your character, all right, is the anarchist who worked at the Weekly Standard. I guess partly what I want to ask you about is the No Kings messaging, right? Did that appeal to your anarchist heart? But also, Matt said something that I thought was really interesting that I've heard elsewhere since these protests, which is that they were very old, right? That like they skewed quite elderly. And that to me is, I don't know if it's quite new, but it's notable because so often the kind of left-leaning, anti-conservative, anti-right political protest movement in the United States has skewed young. It's been college kids. It's been people in their 20s. And that doesn't seem to be the case with the No Kings rallies. Does that, tell us anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm anti-Kings. Also, I will say in the DNA of the No Kings movement, which preexists these protests, they're also anti-billionaires. So I don't want to get too hyped about their deal. They are not libertarians, and certainly not the anarcho-capitalist protesters of my dreams. But the kind of more elderly protesters, first of all to the good, because those are not the people that are going to let the testosterone well up in their bodies in the wrong moment and sort of tip things over into violence. Love me some low T protesters, I guess is what I'm saying. But also Nancy Rommelman, who was our correspondent in Los Angeles covering these protests, notes she's been at quite a few protests and covered them for us. And one thing that she notes is that there are different shifts in some of these bigger protests. There's the kind of daytime folks with their strollers, as Matthew Petti notes, and then there's the night shift guys who see themselves as kind of doing the dirty work or whatever it is. They didn't win out this time, but I think that's luck for the most part. And I think we should be delighted about a slightly elderly daytime protest that stays peaceful, and the more of those, the better. And also, there's always going to be the night shift guys. There's always going to be the lone gunman guys. Unfortunately, there's always going to be the guy that wants to drive their truck into the crowd, and that's should be dealt with in some ways as a separate phenomenon from a bunch of people peacefully marching.
Matt Welch read us that very long bit, which, like I said, wasn't even the whole Truth Social post that Trump posted, right? But that came after two other things had happened. First, Trump posted on social media, I believe it was on Truth Social, that, well, actually, I understand that these immigration raids are hurting farmers and the hospitality industry in particular, right? And maybe we're going to pull back on that, even though we're absolutely going to go after the criminals. And then there was a report following that initial Truth Social post that ICE had actually changed its guidance, and that ICE was going to put the workplace immigration raids that were targeting people who had no criminal record, had not obviously done anything criminal, except possibly coming here illegally, that was going to be put on hold, at least for now. And then, of course, we had this follow-up, which is, it's not at all clear what that order is, even though the word order is in that post. So I don't know exactly what to make of all of this, although it's the ICE guidance that has been reported does seem to be pretty clear and official. But this is sort of classic Trump. He's saying a bunch of things that kind of make sense together, but don't totally make sense together. Is there a through line here, maybe with what's going on in Israel, with the Israel situation and how Trump is reacting to that? Can you kind of draw us like does this tell us something about Trump's character and what we can expect from him?
I do think so. First of all, I will fully admit that I should be wearing, the meme fell for it again. I should be wearing one of those medals with and some of it is, I think, as Matt said, you are sort of, the king is handing you out these little crumbs of like what direction you want to encourage that. You want to positively reinforce if he signals that he's going to do something that you like. But yeah, I do think that people overestimate how monarchical Trump is sort of like, I am the king and these gremlins are running around in my head. I think a lot of this is like the result of palace intrigue and like other factions in the White House sort of pushing and pulling, whether it comes to war and peace, whether it comes to immigration. I do think it is a problem, though, that these things are even the president and the palace can unilaterally make these decisions that affect like millions of people's lives without sort of any public input or transparency into how the process goes. I think also, I will say, I know that like, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, Trump does this because the Democrats forced him. I think that is the dumbest, lamest excuse. But I do think the Democratic opposition has often been really stupid with the taco, Trump always chickens out. Because it's just like, what are you challenging him to do? Do you want him to set everything on fire with tariffs, with immigration, with war? Like, why are you challenging him? I mean, I remember with the North Korea stuff, Trump had been doing some pretty gnarly, alarming, during his first term, threats towards North Korea. And in the end, he does the whole peace through strength thing. And like, that's good that he's, de-escalating the situation and talking and like not pushing it past the line of nuclear war. And the Democrats are all like, Trump is a chicken. He's cozying up to dictators. Like, would you want a nuclear war?
Yeah. We are objectively pro-chickening out almost all the times that Trump chickens out.
Yeah. And I do think also another thing to look at with Trump sort of chickening out on the immigration thing is a friend of mine in Los Angeles made the point, and not anyone in politics, just a regular guy, that this stuff is really going to be bad for the Republicans' sort of Hispanic advantage, where you had Democrats regaining a lot of ground in Latino communities. Often this was like decisive against Democrats. I said Republicans, right? That were gaining ground. And a lot of it is because I think the conventional wisdom that all Latinos care about immigration and that's number one priority was like not true. But I think that the scale and intensity and means of the ICE raids is making this into a salient thing and making this into like, this is an attack on you. I mean, I saw videos of ICE guys like pulling over just like, Hispanic American guys in Los Angeles and like really roughing them up. I mean, not beating them up, but like putting them against the wall and questioning about their ID and being like, what hospital were you born in? And I think that goes beyond like, it's hard. It's harder to make the argument in your head that like, oh, he's just talking about illegals. Like, no, he's not just even talking about immigrants. He's going after you. The state is going to make life harder for you personally.
Yeah, I think there's another way to think about this. I take all of your points here, but like an alternative is Trump is not ideological. He's a businessman, and he's just doing things the way businessmen do things, which is they try to do stuff, and then when it doesn't work, they switch, they take another tactic. And that explains in many ways his sort of pulling back on the immigration raids of farmers in particular, but and the hospitality industry, right? This is a guy who is involved in the hospitality industry. He has his name on hotels, golf courses, right? He has some basic understanding of how that business works, right? And of course, he's also got all these other kind of businesses, some of which seem pretty scammy. He has recently, I just read this morning, he is launching a cell phone plan. I should say the Trump business, not maybe Trump himself, but the Trump family business is launching a cell phone plan called Trump Mobile with a $499 phone that's like gold plated or something. And the price per month for this service is $47.45 because he's the 47th and 45th president. And I guess there's some sort of telehealth thing here. I don't know. I don't understand that at all. But there's an argument that people have made that Trump's only real goal with the presidency is like scammy personal enrichment for himself and his family. Seen this with the crypto stuff, the 7-figure dinners, the gold sneakers, all of it. And I don't know that I think that theory fully explains or even mostly explains everything Trump does, right? He's attracted to power. He thinks of the presidency as a popularity contest. But when you see stuff like this, it is somewhat hard to completely dismiss the idea that he thinks of the presidency, at least partially, as a way to pad his pockets. Matt Welch, you have complained that Trump does this sort of thing. What do you think of Trump's phone plan and all of this? Like, tie it all up for us.
It's just facially corrupt. I mean, anyone cannot look me in the eye and tell me that this isn't the president lining his own pockets by being the president. You can't. So you're going to talk about something else that's more convenient for you. But it's gross and we shouldn't accept it. I want to add 15 seconds, which is just that one of the great things about the Tea Party rallies of 2008, 9, 10 was that the people there criticized their own selves for looking the other way while George W. Bush was greatly expanding government and doing things that were bad. I wish and I hope, but I don't have any expectation that the people protesting No Kings right now have a similar searing personal moral inventory by the way that they looked the other way with the monarchical actions of the previous president and presidents of the Democratic Party, including not limited to, we're just going to look the other way while maybe he's senile, and also waving his magic wands to, relieve student debt and such like. So Katherine is aggressively right, as usual, in saying you don't look for consistency with people in the street.
All right, that brings us to our final segment, What You've Been Watching and Consuming. This is the segment where we talk about a book or a movie or a television show or a board game or sometimes even pickle lemonade that we have been consuming over the past week. Matthew Petti, what do you have for us? Is there a book or a television show, something that you want to talk about with a little bit of libertarian relevance?
First of all, the book that I put the laptop on is a book, Life in Svalbard, which is like the Arctic Norway. I've been such an Arctic tear, but there's not really a libertarian relevance. I think the most libertarian relevant thing I've been reading is this about 10 years old book by an anthropologist, Katherine Mangu-Ward, called My Life as a Spy, where in the, I think, 70s, she had done some kind of anthropology in communist Romania on some very apolitical, very apolitical, harmless topic about like folklore, something about the villagers there. And then after the fall of communism, she found her secret police file from the communist secret police in Romania, who were convinced that she was a CIA agent meant to stir up dissent in Transylvania, because that's where she was doing her fieldwork, and they have an ethnic Hungarian minority. And she ended up coming out with this book in like 2011, I think, that's just like, here are my anthropological field notes of like what I was doing, and here is the Romanian secret police, like in italics, what they thought I was doing. And it's just been a delightful read. I haven't finished it, but it's very funny where she's just, she's the dumb American, right? And she freely admits, like, I'm just like this naive American who's not really been outside the country, thinking that if I'm upfront with everyone and just attract attention, people will like me. And then you have the secret police being like, she has a motorcycle with a backpack. What's in the backpack? Must be code books. And it's just a wonderful thing on like how state bureaucracies. I mean, there's obviously like the specific pathologies of communist Romania, but it's also just like this wonderful thing about like how state bureaucracies create a new reality.
Yeah, the paranoia of it. Matt Welch, what do you have?
For people who like that book recommendation, I can't recommend highly enough Timothy Garton-Ash's The File, which covers similar ground. It's just a fantastic book. What I have is unseemly, because I'm going to recommend something that I was involved with. But bear with me. Brian Doherty wrote a fantastic obituary appreciation eulogy for Brian Wilson, the America's greatest pop singer, songwriter, producer in the rock era. It's terrific. Go read it. I wasn't involved in that because it's better than I would have done. But I was involved in something that a lot of people have been throwing back at me as being meaningful. And I went and listened to it, which I almost never do with things that I'm part of. And it's a two-part episode with Political Beats, the great music podcast now housed over at National Review by Jeff Blair and Scott Bertram. We did a two-part episode on the Beach Boys 6 years ago. 6 hours on the Beach Boys, but the editing of it, Jeff Blair is absolutely brilliant. Knows almost as much, maybe even more than our own Brian Doherty on the history of the Beach Boys, which is a fascinating band. But also they put in a lot of great little snippets of songs to illustrate as you're going on. It's just, it actually is delightful to listen to despite my personal involvement inside of it. And I think for those who either are just mourning the loss of a great American and a great just pop figure, but also might be interested in learning about extra little corners of a band fascinating enough to have recorded songs by Charles Manson, go check out the Political Beats Part 1 and Part 2.
Beach Boys, probably the most relevant pop artist, rock artist to the Iran debate, actually, because
Absolutely.
We all remember John McCain singing "Bomb, bomb, 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 Iran." and getting laughs in the dinner. Katherine, I think you saw a movie that I also saw.
Yes. I saw Materialists, which is a love triangle rom-com featuring Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans, and Pedro Pascal. And it's pretty good. It was pretty good. It's a little bit like Cut Rate Sally Rooney, a little. So you can, if you like Sally Rooney and you're willing to accept a bargain version of it in a cinematic context, great. It is a gal who's a matchmaker who's also trying to find love, and horror of horrors is forced to choose between Chris Evans and Pedro Pascal. Really tough times out there for her. The best scene in the movie, as far as I am concerned, is Pedro Pascal attempting to woo our main character, our protagonist, in a very fancy restaurant, saying in the sexiest possible voice the words "intangible assets." And I'm just saying, like, that's my whole sexuality. I'm not going to lie. So
Wow.
That's basically my recommendation for this movie. It's, it looks nice. It has a nice soundtrack. And if you like a rom-com but hate that they're all really, 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 really stupid, this one is less stupid.
Yeah, and it's less of a comedy. It's funny at times, but this is not a rom-com in the When Harry Met Sally sense or the sort of classic 90s rom-com sense. This is not How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days or anything like that. It's much more of a kind of a soft drama with comic elements, and I really liked this movie a lot. It's just gorgeously shot. It's not just that it looks pretty. It's that it is visually sophisticated, although I would not say that it quite lives up to Celine Song's previous film, Past Lives, which was one of my favorite movies of the year that it came out just a couple of years ago. But that movie also was a love triangle featuring a gal sort of choosing between two guys, one who she's been with for a long time and one who is a sort of lover from the past who reappears in New York as her life and herself have changed. She sort of has to like reckon with like, who am I and what am I doing here? And of course the answer is she's someone who has like plans for herself and is going to go write plays because this is Celine's Song's world. But no, just really a pair of really great kind of intensely romantic, pleasurably romantic films that are smart, certainly smart enough, and I would say particularly Past Lives, just very, very visually sophisticated in a way that you do not typically see with that sort of film. I really liked it. Recommend it for anybody who likes kind of adult romance and wants to see that in the movies again.
I will also give credit to this film for being self-aware about the apartments in New York that the characters inhabit. Like a lot of times in movies that are set in New York, you've just got the like utterly implausible apartments that everyone just moves through. This movie over and over and over is like lets you join in with the characters in like looking around at a really fancy apartment and going like, oh my God. Like at one point, there's just the sale price of an apartment is discussed in the movie in a way that's like kind of delightful. And on the reverse side too, like a very, very, very crappy New York apartment is very realistically depicted and acknowledged as horrifically crappy in a way that I really appreciated.
The crappy New York apartment with roommates, although I will say that the main character's apartment, she literally says at the beginning of the movie, I'm making $80,000 a year before taxes. And then she's got not a big, beautiful, expansive like penthouse, but she's got a nice apartment to herself that is like perfectly clean and, sort of like
rent controlled.
I thought about this obviously a lot. I feel like actually all we see is one wall with nice molding on it. And I'm willing to accept this apartment if we assume that the living room has like no windows, which I think is plausible given what we see of that apartment.
The light in that one wall is gorgeous. And also she goes back to her apartment later and like sits outside having a sad by the
it's
the
on a fire escape.
Yes, which is you can tell like what you see the outside of the building. It's just a little bit
of a
much.
stretch. It's a little bit of a stretch. She got lucky.
I got a funny New York apartment story. Friend of mine is an art mover, so he moves priceless objects of art and obviously sees a lot of apartments that are nicer than his own. And he was moving art to this one like billionaire. I may be getting in trouble to share this. This one billionaire's apartment who had a wall of swords, but not like a normal the way.
I'm sorry, not a normal wall of swords like people normally have. I'll just turn my camera to show you my wall of swords over here.
It's not like you would have the swords hanging like sideways from the wall. The swords are like pointing out at you.
Oh.
He's got to move this like big bulky piece of art while maneuvering around these swords. And I'm like, dude, this is like the James Bond villain he's gonna kill you by pushing you into the.
This very, very like paging Dr. Freud. Like, what in God's name?
No, he built a room that is the meme of like, what opinion has everybody like this at you? And it's like Aladdin with all the swords pointed at him. He wanted to feel like that all the time. And, I suppose if you're in that position in life, do what you want. Go with God. Love you. Everybody deserves a wall of swords. All right, that's our show, folks. Before we go, do remember we have a Reason versus debate on drug legalization, June 24th in Washington, D.C. That's next week. You can buy tickets at reason.com/events. We are also thrilled to announce that the Reason Roundtable will be coming at you live in New York City at the Village Underground on July 15th. It's Tuesday, July 15th. It's going to be a hot one and a fun one. We're going to talk about the news and answer your questions. It's going to be a good show, folks. As always, if you like this podcast, you can support us by going to reason.com/donate. That's reason.com/donate. Thank you so much for listening. Reason Roundtable will return.
What you're saying.